Hello everyone. So today I am back with the thermodynamic lecture series 3. In my lecture 1 and lecture 2, I have mentioned the fundamentals of thermodynamics, the first law of thermodynamics. Today I'll continue my discussion on the basic terminologies of thermodynamics, a few mathematical interludes, and the concept of zeroth law of thermodynamics. Okay, so let's get started. Let me share the screen. So, as if you do not know about my research area and my details, please go to these links to check out my LinkedIn, Google Scholar, and ResearchGate profile. So, let's start our lecture 3. So, what is a process? I was discussing about the mm, fundamentals of thermodynamics. So, process is one of the fundamental terminologies frequently used in thermodynamics. So, process is simply the method by which a system changes its state. I have already discussed in my previous lecture what is a state. Please go to my previous video to check the state variables, the state of a system. So process is defined by the method by which a system changes its state. Okay, so process are of different types. So I'll discuss different types of process. So cyclic process. After a series of changes, the system comes back to its initial state. This is like a circle, like whenever you start from a point and you walk in a circular way and you come back to the same point. The similar is the case for cyclic process. After a series of changes, the system will come back to its initial state, and all of the state variables, temperature, pressure, volume, and mole number, they will get back to its initial value. Okay, so isothermal process, as you can know from this name, isothermal means temperature is constant. Isothermal, that is constant temperature. So obviously, if in a process we have to maintain the temperature, we have to allow the heat exchange. So in this case, the process will be termed as isothermal, and obviously the walls will be perfectly conducting to allow the exchange of heat. Next is adiabatic process. As I have mentioned in the types of systems in my previous video, so this is if you have noticed that this adiabatic wall was specific for the isolated system, so where the exchange of mass and energy is allowed between the system and the surroundings. So obviously in this case, heat exchange, uh, I'm sorry, the exchange of mass and energy is not permitted between the system and surroundings. That is specific for a isolated system, and that isolated system has an adiabatic wall. So obviously in this adiabatic process, heat exchange will not be allowed between the system and the surroundings because energy exchange and mass exchange is not allowed. So if heat exchange is not allowed, then the temperature will vary. Okay, so next is isobaric process. As you see from the name, isobaric means constant pressure. So obviously in this process, pressure will be constant, so volume will vary. His example is heating of water in a beaker open to 1 atmosphere. And then isochoric, as you can see from the name, isochoric means constant volume. So in this process, volume will be constant, and obviously pressure will change to maintain that constant volume. And next, polytropic process, where heat capacity remains fixed. So I have already discussed about heat capacity in my very first lecture. Please watch that to know about heat capacity. So in this process, heat capacity CV will remain fixed. So next, I will discuss two special categories of process: reversible process and irreversible process. So for the reversible process, two criteria has to be satisfied. Point number one is that during the change of initial state to final state, the driving force and the opposing force, they will differ by infinitesimal amount. That is, if you will change the state of the system from during the change of the system from its initial state to final state, obviously there will be a driving force, otherwise the system cannot change state. And obviously there will be a opposing force. For any process to occur, there will be a driving force and an opposing force. So these two forces, they will differ by a very, very small amount. And uh, criteria number two is that the final state of the system can be reversed back to its initial state without apply of any external energy. So these two uh, criteria has to be satisfied for a process to be reversible. Okay, so this is obviously, this is not a real process, this is only a concept. We have only one example of a true reversible process which we can feel, which we can see, that is the reversible phase change. This is an example is melting of ice to water at 0 degree centigrade and 1 atmosphere pressure. So this is the only example of a real reversible process. Otherwise, all other processes are irreversible. Like this is only a concept of an ideal situation. We do not see this ideality in reality. Okay. So, as I mentioned, these two above points has to be satisfied to a process to be reversible. So, for this process, it actually occurs in infinite number of steps. It doesn't occur in one step. It will have infinite steps, and in each step, the system will attain equilibrium. So this is uh, an hypothetical process. Okay, this cannot occur in reality. Only the one example is there, that is the reversible phase change, like melting of ice to water at 0 degree centigrade and 1 atmosphere pressure. So since this reversible process occurs a large number of equilibrium states, so reversible process is known as equilibrium process. So obviously, irreversible process is the process when the above two conditions are not fulfilled, the process becomes irreversible. So this process is obviously very rapid. It doesn't occur in many steps. It is a one-step process. It is rapid and it is spontaneous. Like all the process we see in our real life, they are irreversible process. It occurs against constant opposing pressure. So obviously, as the second criterion says, the initial state of the system cannot be reversed without the aid of external agency by this process. So example is expansion of a gas against a constant external pressure. So I will show you, I will draw the uh, reversible phase and irreversible phase, and I will explain you through a pictorial presentation. Okay. So let me share the whiteboard. So this is a reversible process. Let's say n mole of a gas is kept in a cylinder with weightless, frictionless, and movable piston. And the gas, let me write this, n mole of gas. So this is kept within the cylinder with a weightless, frictionless, and movable piston. And this gas is being expanded uh, from initial state to a final state. Let's say the initial state is P1, P1, and final state is P2, P2. Okay, so whenever the gas follows a reversible process, let's see what happens. So driving pressure is driving force is P1. And what was the first criteria for reversible process? The driving force and the opposing force, they will differ by a very small amount. Okay, so the opposing force, let's say opposing force is P1 minus dP. So for the first criterion to be fulfilled, dP should be close to 0. Okay, so now second criteria was the final state of the process. It cannot be reversed to the initial state without apply of the final state of the process can be reversed to the initial state uh, without apply of an external energy. So, and I also mentioned that this is a process where the process occurs in infinite infinite number of steps. So it will not just change its volume from V1 to V2. There will be infinite steps, and in each step the system will attain equilibrium. So let me draw this. Suppose this was V1 and suppose this is V2. So this will not be just one step process. It will occur in infinite number of steps. Okay. So these are the infinite number of steps between V1 and V2. So let's say in each step the volume is increased by dV. So V1 it will change to V1 plus dV, and then it will change to V1 plus 2 dV. Like this, it will continue until V2 minus dV, and then the final step will be V2. Okay, I hope you understand this. So the system, this volume change will occur with infinite steps. So and each step the volume is changing. V1 plus dV, V1 plus 2 dV, V2 plus 3 dV. Like this will continue until V2 minus dV, and finally it will change to V2. Similarly, the pressure, it was P1, and P1 will change to P1 will change to P1 minus dP, and then it will be P1 minus 2 dP, and then P1 minus 3 dP, and this will continue until P2 plus dP, and then finally P2. So the pressure and volume change, they are occurring in infinite steps, you can see from this, and at each step the system will attain equilibrium. So this is obviously a hypothetical process. There is no real example of this process except the reversible phase change. Okay, so let me draw the irreversible process diagram. So this is pretty simple. This is all the real process we see, like the same system, the same volume change and pressure change is being is occurring V1 to V2, and pressure is changing P1 to P2. But this is a rapid, spontaneous, and one-step process. So any volume expansion of a gas, the same thing. Suppose n mole of gas is being expanded. The volume of the gas is being expanded from V1 to V2 against a constant external pressure. So this doesn't occur in infinite number of small steps. This is an example of a real process. Okay, so now let me discuss a few mathematical criterions which we always use. We use some simple mathematics in our thermodynamic derivations. So let me discuss a few mathematical interlude, the few basic math concepts. Okay, so one of them is like, if z is a function of x and y, in this case, its partial derivative, how do you do that? Dz, change of z, that will be del z, del x, y, dy plus del z, del y, x, dx. So the difference in z will be change in z with respect to x when y is constant into change in y plus change in z uh, with respect to y when x is constant into change in x. So this is called partial differential. So this is something which we use multiple times in our thermodynamic derivations. So I just wanted to mention this. Okay, and another thing I want to discuss, the sign of the heat and work done. Okay, so I have mentioned the concept of heat and work in the thermodynamic first law, and also I have discussed about heat and work. So I want to discuss the sign convention of heat and work, when heat is positive and when it is negative, when work is positive and when work is negative. So let me draw the system and the surroundings. I have also discussed about system and surroundings. So let's suppose this is system. Obviously, the rest is surroundings. Okay. So let me draw this diagram. Okay. So heat is positive whenever it enters the system. As you can see from this diagram, heat is entering within the system. So in this case, the heat will be positive. That is endothermic. We know about endothermic reactions. So whenever we are supplying heat within a system, then heat will be positive. Okay, and uh, work, when it will be positive, whenever the work is done on the system, work is done on the system. Okay, work is not done by the system, it is done on the system. In this case, work will be positive. Similarly, the reverse thing will apply for negative convention. That is, let me draw this. So obviously, whenever heat leaves from a system, suppose for a chemical reaction, the reaction is generating heat by itself. In this case, it is known as exothermic reaction. So any exothermic phenomena, in that case, heat will be negative. Okay, so exothermic. And for work, so if work is done on the system, work is not work is done uh, by the system. Okay, I think I have uh, written this wrong. Work is done by the system. This is actually positive, and work is done on the system, that will be negative. Okay, sorry about that. So work done on the system. So in this case, work will be negative, and work done by the system, in this case, work will be positive. Okay, so these are two important convention, sign convention about heat and work. We have to remember this. Okay, and obviously, work done by the system or work done on a system, it does not only depend on the initial and final state, but it also depend on the process and the path. I have already discussed about path and process in my previous video. Okay, so let me discuss few more mathematical points which we use in thermodynamical derivations. So I will discuss what is a perfectly differential quantity. Perfectly differential quantity. This is also known as exact differential. I'm sorry for the bad handwriting. This is perfectly differential quantity. This is also known as exact differential. So when we call a quantity as a perfectly differential quantity or exact differential, for this we have few criterions. So condition number one, uh, suppose if we have taken a quantity x, uh, in an order to satisfy x to be a exact differential, x must be a state function, a single value state function. Okay. So what is state function? State function is a function that is defined for a system relating to the state variables temperature, pressure, volume and mole number, and this depends on the thermodynamic equilibrium state of the system. So this is known as the state function. Okay. So for x to be a perfectly differential quantity, x must be a state function, a single valued state function. Okay. Criterion number two is that dx, the change in x, it will be independent independent of path. So I have already discussed about the thermodynamic path. What is a path? So from if a system wants to change its state from initial state to a final state, this change of state, it can occur between different type of paths. I have discussed these paths in my previous lecture, which was that. So dx, the change in x, it would be independent of any path for its state change. So the system can take any path, but dx will be independent of this path change. Okay. And condition number 3 is cyclic integration of dx. This equals to 0. So, as I have mentioned in the first slide, the change, uh, the cyclic process. So, in order to x to be a perfectly differential quantity, cyclic integration of dx will be 0. Okay, and criterion number 4 is that if x is a function of T and P, temperature and pressure, it will always obey the Euler's reciprocal theorem. What is that? If x is a function of T and P, Euler's reciprocal theorem says that del square Z by, del square x del square x by del T. I'm sorry for this. Del T del P, this is equals to del square x by del P del T. This is known as Euler's reciprocal theorem. So x must satisfy these four criterion in order to be a perfectly differential quantity. So let me tell you that most of the thermodynamical properties, I'll discuss them one by one in my next lectures, like enthalpy, entropy, internal energy. Let me write this. Euler's theorem. So most of the thermodynamic parameters, the properties, they are perfectly differential quantity. Okay. So next, let me quickly discuss about the cyclic rule. What is the cyclic rule? So as we all know about the state variables of a system, temperature, pressure, volume, and mole number. So we are, for ideal situation, we are already considering n equals 1. So let's just consider about temperature, pressure, and volume. So what is the cyclic rule? Let me discuss this. So function of temperature, pressure, and volume, this is equals to 0. Okay. So what is the ideal gas equation? We all know this. PV equal to RT. PV equals to nRT, but we have already considered n is equal to 1, so PV equals to RT. This is ideal gas equation. We all know this. So let me do a quick derivatives. So PV equals to RT, so P equals to RT by V. So let me differentiate P del V at constant temperature. This will be, obviously we are differentiating this with respect to V. So R and T at constant temperature. So R and T are constant. So we'll only differentiate 1 by V. So that is minus 1 by V square. So minus RT by V square. Okay, and if we do this, V equal to RT by P. Okay, and if we differentiate del V del T at constant pressure, so in this case, so we are differentiating V with respect to T, so at constant pressure, so this R by P is constant, so it will be R by P only, because differentiation of T will be 1. Okay, so please try to recollect the differentiation, the very basic differentiation rules we have, which we learned in our school level. Okay, and then T equals to PV by R. So we are just writing the different forms from this equation. Okay, I hope you can understand this. So del T del P V this, so we are differentiating temperature change with respect to pressure at constant volume. So obviously this is constant and differentiation of P will be 1, so this will be equals to P by R. Okay, so let me circle this also. So whichever properties we have circled here, they are constant. Okay, so I hope you can understand these differentiations. They are very simple. We have already known them from our school level. Okay, so if we multiply all of them, in that case, del v del del p del v t del v del t p into del t del p v, this will be equals to minus RT y v square R by P into V by R. So let's see, it's equals to minus RT by PV. So we already know PV equals to RT, so this is equals to minus 1. So whenever function of PVT equals to 0, del V del del P del V T multiplied by del V del T P multiplied by del T del P V equals to minus negative 1. Okay, so this is the known as cyclic rule. We can write this pictorially: P T and V. Okay, so we just write this pictorially like this. This is known as cyclic rule. Okay, so let me go back to my slide. Let me share the screen. So I was discussing about the different type of process. So let me quickly go to the zeroth law of thermodynamics. Okay, so what is zeroth law? This is very simple. Whenever two systems, they are each found to be in thermal equilibrium with a third system, they will be in thermal equilibrium with each other. Let me explain this. Suppose system A and B, they are in thermal equilibrium with a third system C. A is in equilibrium with C and B is also in equilibrium with C. So in this case, A and B, they will also be in a thermal equilibrium. This is a pretty simple thing. Okay. So if A and C are in thermal equilibrium, in this case, temperature of A and temperature of C will be similar. So TA equals to TC. Similarly, temperature of B and temperature of C, they are also similar. So in that case, obviously temperature of A and temperature of B will be same. So A and B will also be in thermal equilibrium. This is the zeroth law. And I have already discussed in my very first lecture why this law is known as zeroth law, because this law was discovered after the first law, but the it is very fundamental thing, so it should come before the first law, so we call it a zeroth law. So what is the significance of zeroth law? It introduces the concept of temperature as thermodynamic state function. So it introduces the concept of temperature. Okay, so this is the zeroth law. And let me quickly tell about internal energy. I hope you remember the internal energy terminology in the first law of thermodynamics. Q equals to W plus du. So that du was the change in internal energy. So what is internal energy? A system by virtue of its existence possesses a store of energy. So this stored up energy is called internal energy. So uh, some examples of internal energy: whenever a liquid freezes to ice, we feel the evolution of latent heat. So this is an evidence of internal energy, because liquid is freezing to ice. Suppose it is changing its phase, and it is uh, giving up some latent heat. So where it is getting that heat? So it had already some energy stored. The similar is the case when in an electrochemical Daniell cell, where there is a reaction between the zinc and H2SO4, it is producing some electrical energy. The chemical energy is being converted to electrical energy. So this is also an evidence of internal energy of the system. And a very easy example is whenever we burn a candle, a lot of heat energy is being produced. So this is also the inherent internal energy of the system. Now I will quickly tell about some properties of internal energy, and like which forces they contribute to the internal energy of a system. So as I discussed in my whiteboard about the perfectly differential quantity, so U is a perfectly differential quantity, and this is an extensive property. So I have already discussed about extensive property, that is which property is dependent on the amount of material present within the system, that is known as extensive property. Okay, so now let me quickly discuss about the factors which contribute to internal energy. Okay, so internal energy is a function of temperature and volume. Okay, so these factors from where internal energy is coming from a system. I have mentioned that uh, a system by virtue of its existence, it possesses internal energy. Okay, so from where it is getting the internal energy? So any system, they have three different types of motion: transitional, vibrational, and rotational. It has three different types of motion, and all these motions, they contribute to internal energy. Okay, and next, the motions of electron and nuclei, they also contribute to internal energy. And uh, the internal potential energy and the internal kinetic energy, they both contribute to the internal energy of the system. So what is the internal potential energy? So within a system, we have within a molecule, we have proton, neutron, and electron. So three different type of particles present within a molecule. So we know that electron is negatively charged, and proton is positively charged, and neutron is neutral. Okay, so there will be attractive and repulsive forces. Attractive force between a proton and a electron. There will be repulsive forces within an electron, and an electron within a proton and a proton. So all these interparticle attractive and repulsive forces, they contribute to the internal potential energy. So this internal potential energy, they contribute to the stored up internal energy within a system. And also I have already discussed about the different type of motions. Like a system always possesses three different type of motions: transitional, vibrational, and rotational. Okay, so all these three different type of motions, they contribute to the internal kinetic energy. And these two energies, internal potential energy and internal kinetic energy, they contribute to the stored up internal energy within a system. Okay, so I have already discussed in my previous slide that a simple example is whenever of internal energy is whenever we light up a candle, a lot of heat is being produced. So this is an example of the internal energy of a possessed by a system. Okay, but energy, whenever a system acquire some energy in an external field, like we if we place a system within a electrical field, any external electrical field, or we apply any gravitational force on it, we place the system on a magnetic field, or we do some surface change of the system, then the system will also gain some energy, but those energies are due to the external energy. This is not internal energy. Okay, so only the internal potential energy due to the proton, neutron, and electron attraction and repulsion, it contributes to the internal energy. And also the constituent particle motion, transitional, vibrational, and rotational motion, all these motions, they contribute to the internal energy. But if we place a system in an external field and it is gaining some energy due to that, this is not an example of internal energy. They will be known as external energy. Okay, so I'll be discussing about more details in my uh, next lecture videos. I will introduce the concept of second law, and I will do more mathematical formulations, derivations. So please watch my series on thermodynamics. Okay, and do like, share, and subscribe. And if you have any question, post it in the comment section. I'll try my best to answer them. Okay, bye bye.